And we are live. Hi, this is Ren,
This is Casey.
And this is Maverick.
and this is All Walks of Film. So, a couple months back, we talked about The Last Jedi. We did three podcasts. One was just like a prediction podcast, and then we did a group chat and our own individual take on The Last Jedi. And now we have Maverick, who just saw the film for the first time. You only saw it once, right?
I watched it a second time so that I could make my notes.
Okay, great. And we both saw it a second time today, just to have the film fresh on our minds. And I will say that my initial opinion of the movie was I thought it wasn't bad, but I thought it was a bad Star Wars film. Seeing it again, I think it's a bad film too. What does everybody else think about it?
It made me question whether or not Star Wars was ever good, ever. Which was a very surreal and disturbing experience that I did not wish to repeat.
And for you, Maverick?
Well, I am highly disappointed with The Last Jedi as well as The Force Awakens. And I will say one thing about The Force Awakens in regard to that. When I was in middle school, I started writing the story. And the progression of the plot was very much the same as it was in The Force Awakens. Like the driving aspects to push the plot forward were so similar that I'm like looking back, it's like, geez, this is The Force Awakens was a middle school level story. Like a middle schooler could have written it. And if that's not bad enough, they framed it after, various aspects after A New Hope and everything.
Yeah.
I was highly disappointed with that. Going into it, my expectations were quite low. That said, I was disappointed.
All right. I'm just letting you know you're breaking up. So if you have any other like apps open or something like that, maybe close them.
Is my sound okay?
Yeah, your sound's
Hello?
okay. Also, if you have like a PlayStation on or yeah, I can hear you. Can you not hear us?
I can hear you kind of. You're in and out.
Okay. Do we need to take a break and try to get back on? And I'll just let people.
You're coming in clear now.
Okay.
Am I coming in clearly?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. Well, should I start my review?
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
Hello?
Yeah, sure. Go for it. Can you not hear me?
There we go. Now I heard you.
Okay.
If at any point it cuts out and you don't hear something I say, feel free to stop me, okay?
Okay. I am actually going to lower the bandwidth settings. I'm just going to make it audio only. Hopefully that will mitigate some of the issues that we have. Do you not get good internet reception at your place?
In my room, it's kind of sometimes it's a little less than it should be.
Okay, I just realized my PlayStation's on, so I'm going to turn it off, and maybe that will help.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me know when to proceed.
All right. So I am back now.
All right. So am I coming in clearly now?
Yeah, I can hear you pretty clear.
What?
Well, I did say that I could hear you pretty clear, but I guess you didn't hear that part. Is that
Now
true?
I hear you. All right.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and do this. I would like to start with a disclaimer that the Star Wars universe and the franchise itself is a great thing, and I admire it. I think it has a lot of excellent material and tons of potential beyond what has already been made. That's probably what makes The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi so disappointing, is because I feel like they're squandering that potential. I think that fans of the source material deserve better. And I think I are grasping so strongly to the new material is that they, to the series as say, this is part of the Star Wars universe. It's now part of the canon. So some feel like disliking it is kind of a treason the rest of the material. True. To the contrary, if you love something, you should want the best for it, right?
Yeah.
So that said, I have another reason for flat out hating The Last Jedi. It not only
You're breaking up on me.
sucked, but it can
I
actually make you dumber for having watched it. Hear me out.
I need you to repeat.
Make
I need you to repeat what you're saying. Sorry.
What was the last thing you heard?
The part right before you said it's making you dumber.
All right. It not only sucked, but it can make you dumber for having watched it. Hear me out. Yes, entertainment doesn't have to make sense, but adding realism is a proven method to make works more relatable and entertaining. Whereas normalizing contrived scenarios, inconsistent patterns, and extremely disjointed logic, as well as horrible character flaws, normalizing those things will lead to a form of cognitive dissonance. You may think I'm exaggerating, but I have a math degree and years of teaching experience.
All right, I need you to repeat what you're saying about your math degree. Can you just say that part again?
Okay, so I have a degree in math and a minor in education, years of teaching experience, and I can tell you that teens and younger are highly susceptible to adopting counterintuitive thinking habits that actually make life and learning far more difficult. I now will begin citing such examples from The Last Jedi. I've actually put this into several different topics. Obviously, there's science. Now, I've not nitpicked this to death, but I do have aspects of science that I do want to discuss, including the infamous light speed incident. Then I have topics on psychology.
Mm-hmm.
I have topics of overuse of cliche. And then my final topic, which I'm particularly proud of breaking apart, I call it All About Poe. His character was extremely disappointing. So stay tuned to hear about that. So starting off with science, 7 minutes into the film, the little repair robot abandons all sense in repairing delicate circuitry and shoves its head into the circuit board. This should never have worked. No engineers were consulted for this. It's just ridiculous, and it's the kind of hit it with a hammer approach that we need to avoid, especially with electronics becoming more and more fragile. And speaking of fragile, 9 minutes in, we find out how fragile the bombers are. There are so many flaws in this delivery method that it doesn't seem like a design that desires success. It does not seem like something that was engineered with any success in mind. Like it was there's so many things wrong with the bombers that it's counterintuitive to even think that they would exist.
Yeah, I mean, from my understanding, it was the bombers were on like some sort of magnetic path or something like that, because I know a lot of criticism came from the bombers and being like, oh, you know, if they're dropping in space, why wouldn't they just like float? And I think some people explain that they were magnetized, but you know, I agree with you that it's kind of a
I'm just
the
talking
setup.
about the fact that they were so easily blown up, as well as the fact that, let's face it, you could have launched a payload inside of something without risking people in the process. We have slow-moving bombers which are destined to get blown up in the process, rather than just taking the payload directly to where it needs to go through, you know, some more what is it? Just an unmanned ship or something like that, just launched directly where it needs to go.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen what BB-8 can do. Why can't ships run like that? I don't understand why you can't essentially have drones in Star Wars now. I mean, we have the technology in our own time. And yes, I understand that George Lucas would not have had the understanding of that technology, but a certain amount of time has passed since the original trilogy and now, and you would think that they would have the ability to have unmanned vehicles, especially when artificial intelligence in that world has been developed so much.
Yeah, like what you really need if you're just trying to get that payload from point A to point B is transportation. Focus on that. So I'll skip over a little bit of rant about the whole thing. Let's just assume that the magnetic thing makes sense, despite various reasons why it would not. But 13 minutes in, Finn is in a body bag of fluids, and you might have someone say, "Oh, so that's so they don't have to suspend him in a chamber of liquid." But the purpose of those liquid chamber things is suspension, not the actual liquid. Like, this bag of liquids makes no sense. But that's a small thing. So moving on. 31 minutes in, we have cannons firing green bolts that arc as if gravity existed in space. And
Well, the entire vacuum of space doesn't seem to exist in this movie.
Well, you know, not really to be fair to this movie, because I, you know, nitpick the hell out of it. I don't care, because good God. But you know, the whole vacuum of space stuff in Star Wars has always kind of been a little shoddy. I mean, you look at the original trilogy, and I mean, you know, you don't have sound travel the way it does.
you know, I
in
figure
space.
sound and stuff, that's artistic license. Like, that's for entertainment value. That's fine. I'm not going that petty about it. But yeah, at least have, you know, the cannons not fire arc shots. You know, that's at that point it's just ridiculous. But anyway, moving on. The infamous light speed issue. It's about time someone used light speed as a weapon. And I used to point out repeatedly that a light speed ship could have taken out the Death Star if it's actually a light speed ship. But if this, it would have been the simplest way to destroy it, because okay, I won't get into all the physics, but
no, you can. We got time.
What happened to the dreadnought? I'll round back on this, but what happened to the dreadnought should have been far worse for gravitational reasons alone. But when we're talking about the short space of time at which it accelerates, the speed at which it goes, like all those aspects together, like by momentum alone, it should have obliterated the thing, as well as the gravitational issues caused by approaching the speed of light, even approaching it. However, let's say that maybe there's a reason that they don't use light speed. Let's say perhaps what they're actually entering is known as hyperspace. That's something else entirely. What that doesn't actually have to do with actual speed. That's manipulating the space around you, and that would influence the dreadnought entirely differently, since the ship wouldn't actually have near as much momentum. The collision would be minimal. The worst it could do if it was entering hyperspace would potentially displace some of the ship it's hitting before the collision. But that would basically bore a hole in the ship a little bit over the ship's the size of its shields.
Which
So
is
let's
kind of
say
like
that-
what happened in the movie. I mean, like there was only a small fraction of the ship that was destroyed when that attack happened. Like it was like near the middle, to my understanding.
I mean, we could, let's put it this,
You're
doesn't
breaking up on
determine
me.
if the shield clears that area.
Can you repeat that?
Let's look at it this way. Are we deciding whether or not the ship clears through an area or not? So if a ship is entering hyperspace, what it's actually going to end up going against when it hits the dreadnought is an extremely dense portion of dreadnought. So the ship itself would actually be screwing itself over. Now, the displacing of this, in the process right before it hits, it would displace a certain amount, but that's very limited. Like when you're entering hyperspace, you're not displacing everything in front of you immediately. You're displacing it as you approach it. That's the only way that they could actually do that. Because you can't like just beam light minutes ahead of you. You can't influence that space. You have to be close enough to that space to reach it. So when they get to a certain distance from the dreadnought, the distance at which they can manipulate and whatnot, which is approximately the distance of the ship's shields. So what I'm saying is that ship has to make contact with the dreadnought at some point in its course before it can manipulate further. So let's say maximum possible distance to the dreadnought. It could do maybe 3 of its ship size in, if it's simply displaced, but it'd be condensing that space, so it actually it wouldn't be colliding with the ship. It would be basically crunching a portion of that ship tightly together, compacting it.
Okay.
That's so it would compact a portion of the ship up until it reached a certain portion in there, at which it would be blown to bits in the collision.
Okay.
That concludes my science section. Now let's talk a little bit about psychology. In The Last Jedi, Luke has a very smart-ass personality, which simply does not fit his character. I have not watched the animated show, but I know that he was very serious in the original. He was a Jedi monk, at some point. He's, gravely serious as a hermit, there's a lot of reasons why he should have, seriousness. Like if you're a hermit, you don't have a whole bunch of people to practice your smartassery with.
Yeah.
So his death is completely out of place under all the circumstances. And it's not even delivered very well. It's like he's trying to emulate Yoda, but Yoda did all that stuff for the sake of being underestimated. It's clear Luke does that because it's written that way.
Yeah, and that is like one of the frustrating things, because you hit the nail on the head there. Because if Luke Skywalker is supposed to be this embittered man, then I would assume that somebody of that nature would be a lot more serious than what he is. You know, I would assume that he would be, dour, angry. Like, he wouldn't be making jokes about like, oh, that's the Force or whatever. He'd just be like, oh, well, clearly you don't know what you're doing and all that kind of stuff. Like, that seems to be like, if you're following the logic of what an embittered person is supposed to be, like, Luke Skywalker doesn't necessarily fit that either. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. It just doesn't fit in entirely.
Yeah, it fits because Rian Johnson says so. That's kind of how a lot of the movie feels, actually. Like, things don't logically make sense. They just make sense because the script tells it to happen.
Well, more importantly, things don't make sense. Like, there is definitely a suspension of disbelief, and there's like, you can make laws for your own world, but the problem is that anytime things don't make logical sense, or they happen because the plot needs it to happen, the most important thing is that they don't make sense with what the characters are trying to do or how the characters would behave, and they don't make sense with the world that's already been built up for what, 8 movies before this one?
Mm-hmm. Oh, 7. Well, I guess if you're counting Rogue One, 8.
And I do.
Yeah,
Okay.
Rogue One is a Star Wars movie. It's certainly a lot more of a Star Wars movie than this movie.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming it's going to be more of a Star Wars movie than Solo.
Now, here's one thing that really makes it not feel like a Star Wars movie, though. Throughout the whole film, non-humans were more of a novelty than ever before in the series. I think Porgs got more screen time than Chewbacca. And it really takes away from the atmosphere that was present in the rest of the series. Because in the rest of the series, before The Force Awakens, you've got various alien characters. You've got Jabba the Hutt. You've got all these different things and everything. Whereas in this one, you've got these little, enslaved things that take care of the Jedi, monuments and whatnot. You've got Porg.
The space nuns.
Yeah, and you've got an occasional thing in the background, but so you don't have any main character non-humans other than like Chewbacca.
Yeah, and you got rid of Admiral Akbar with like nothing. Like, I remember having to have other people tell me that like Admiral Akbar died in that scene, because I was like, wait, oh yeah, he was on the bridge when that happened, but like he didn't even get a shot. You don't even have a shot of him like floating in space. No, you got to focus on Leia doing her stupid Mary Poppins thing in space instead of like, realizing the devastation that just happened.
Now I got to ask you something. Is it just me, or does the term resistance bombers sound like a euphemism for terrorists?
There is way too much glamorizing and glorifying the idea of martyrdom. Like when Laura Dern is like, "Hey, I'm gonna, sacrifice myself to save everyone else," she sounds like really happy and excited about it. Like, "Ooh, I'm gonna go on the log ride."
And then they're chuckling to each other like, "May the Force be with," and it's like, seriously, it was not the mood for that moment.
All right,
That
so
was
I'm gonna
like each other again kind of attitude.
counter what you're saying for a little bit, just because to me, Star Wars has always kind of had a glorification of terrorism. I mean, the Rebel Alliance essentially were terrorists. And you know, from a certain point of view, obviously. But you know, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. And one of the things that I think Rian Johnson and J.J. Abrams tend to forget about the Imperial fleet is, well, the Empire as a whole, was that they restored order to the galaxy. Like, they created peace. Now, granted, that peace was through fascism, but it was, you could interpret that as some sort of balance, some sort of, you know, like not a perpetual state of war or, you know, inner conflicts. And yes, I know that there were bounty hunters and all that kind of stuff and shady stuff always going on in Star Wars, which seems oddly absent from Star Wars now, which I don't get what's up with.
Basically, it's just less war, but more of the same shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's frustrating because it seems that both J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson don't understand some of the more subtle world building that the original Star Wars trilogy had. Now, granted, George Lucas seems to not understand that, because if you look at the prequels, you know, yes, they get on with like space politics and all that kind of stuff, and you know, it's thinly veiled about its time. You know, like you have the prequels, which are about the Bush era. You know, with yeah, the prequels were about the Bush era, and I would say this is sort of the Trump era. You know, they're especially the second one. I mean, like, if you can't draw a parallel to
yeah, Kylo's a bit of a brat, and he's whiny, and he's got.
I was gonna say Hux. Like, Hux is totally a like Trump type, and it feels that that's what they were trying to do in the movie. I mean, he was a lot more intimidating in the first movie, and in this movie, there wasn't a single line that he delivered that didn't come off as forced and cheesy.
Oh, dude, it gets better though. This next point I have, 17 minutes in. Snoke talks about manipulating a cur. He's like, you know, blah, 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 Hux is a cur, you know, but a cur can be useful. And Kylo fails to see the irony here. Even after a minute later, he basically gets called the next best thing to a cur by Snoke. Snoke's like, yeah, you know, I thought you were okay, but now I realize I was completely wrong and you're a little bitch, you know, like, and Kylo fails to realize, oh, I'm a cur and I'm being manipulated too. Like, completely lost on him.
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously, my next point is 32 minutes in, Leia goes all Mary Poppins with the Force. Like, perhaps we're all just puppets of the Force. Maybe the writers interpreted the Force as a means to force the plot to do what they want it to do. And one of those things was saving Leia.
Okay, so in this moment, watching it again, because like for the longest time, because Disney keeps tight grip on their films, so you can't see like clips that they don't allow you to see. Obviously, this one was like held off for a long time, but like watching it again, literally she's posed in one position, and like she doesn't change that position at all, and you can obviously tell it's green screen, and that like all she does is like lift her arm, and then like it's so cheesy. Like,
hey, maybe she thought a happy thought.
But even when she gets onto the ship, instead of like breathing for a moment and realizing that like she might be dead or she's passed out or anything like that, they quickly, immediately put her on a respirator. Like they don't even show the, you know, oh, we got to carry her away to be on the respirator. They just cut to her on the respirator on the recovery bed. And I'm just like, why?
It takes away from the drama of the moment.
Exactly.
Yeah, but that's like a reoccurring problem with this movie. Like, I feel that most likely a lot of the truly terrible, god-awful amateur editing actually probably stems from having to cover up from big mistakes in production. Because there are so many times all throughout the movie where stuff definitely happened just entirely off screen for like huge chunks at a time, where like you see the build up to a moment and then you see after the moment's happened, but you don't actually see what happened.
I was ranting the entire time I watched this the first time. I was watching it with the girl I'm dating and everything, and I was just like, for a little while it felt I was like flashing back to watching The Disaster Artist, and I was just like, oh my god,
That's
it's
a
the
lot more
real
fun.
place. What?
I said, but that would have been so much more fun to be watching The Room.
I know, it was The Room in space for me.
But here's the thing, I feel like The Room at least had a clearer vision of what it wanted to be. At least, like, The Room was very clearly attempting to be a fairly adult, emotional, dramatic piece. Whereas with The Last Jedi, more than any other Star Wars movie, I feel like they couldn't figure out how to balance, like, dealing with...
meandering forward without a goal.
Right, there was a lot of meandering forward without a goal. There were a lot of, like, really combative, conflicting themes in the movie that don't work together. But also, like, the tone...
Poe, you'll love that one.
Oh, right, exactly. But then also there was a big problem with the tone where it's like, okay, how do you balance really adult conversations about, like, big political issues that could actually be discussed if you gave it the proper time and better script, and like really obnoxiously childish toddler entertainment. It was one extreme or the other at any given point, and usually within a matter of seconds it goes back and forth. At least like The Room is pretty consistent, and once you're in it, you're just watching it and you know what you're getting, and it feels like, okay, well, somebody had a concept here.
Yeah. Now here's... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, the whole breast cancer thing in The Room, how like it's brought up, and then like she later says she no longer has breast cancer, which is hilarious because like that's a whole process that you have to go to like do that.
But here's the thing: The Room only did that once. The Last Jedi did that in almost every single beat.
Yeah, and what I find really surprising about the movie is, so I have for the longest time been a fan of Rian Johnson. I loved Looper. My favorite episodes of Breaking Bad were directed by Rian Johnson. Ozymandias is one of the greatest episodes of TV ever. I haven't seen The Brothers Bloom. That's the only one I haven't seen. And I really enjoyed Brick. You know, Brick does have some issues because, you know, it's a movie that takes place in high school, and there's some logistical loops that you have to like just accept in that movie. But you know, that movie's a lot of fun. But you know, I thought Rian Johnson was capable enough to like direct the next movie. Like I thought he was going to get more serious with it, but it wound up being goofier in many aspects than some of the prequels. Like maybe not The Phantom Menace, because like, quite frankly, I think The Phantom Menace is the worst Star Wars movie still to date, minus the Christmas special. But yeah,
We'll see with the
I'm gonna wait. I gotta play devil's advocate for a minute. No. I'm dead serious. The toddler childish humor was definitely a lot worse in Phantom Menace, but the actual like political discussion was at least like, I mean, it was still boring and obnoxious and preachy and didn't go anywhere. Nobody wanted it in the movie, but I would still rather watch Queen Amidala talk about politics than watch Laura Dern entirely fail to talk about politics.
mm,
Mm,
yeah.
I might actually rather watch Phantom Menace again over Last Jedi.
is they gave some potential to alien characters and everything, like,
True.
and they even very briefly had a non-human major enemy, and
Yeah,
that was
that
cool. And then they got rid of him.
that's been my
Yeah,
complaint
that was a big
with,
waste of time. That was a big waste of potential. I mean, with Darth Maul. Darth Maul was awesome.
Yeah,
that's been my complaint with Star Wars for a long time, is just the underutilization of alien characters. You know,
Not
you
really
have
anything
this.
interesting.
like I said, the series itself has a lot of potential, but it's underutilized. And I'll relate this to Harry Potter. See, the Harry Potter universe has a lot going for it, but I've seen so much fan fiction that's legitimately better than the books themselves.
Hmm.
Like, I've seen different uh, aspects of how things could have gone and whatnot, where it's just like there are the universe is like good soil. You can plant anything in it, and some of the people who made the universe though just keep planting the wrong stuff. They don't water it. They don't use it right. It's sad, and that's kind of how I feel about how where Star Wars is that it's hyped, it's got the popularity, and it's just failing to do much.
Yeah, you could say that again.
So on to the next point. 1 hour, 22 minutes, and 30 seconds in, Luke admits to not even reading the literature that he followed, taught for years, and condemned. I don't know about you, but this sounds like a lot of Catholics I know. Like there's a lot of similarity because they're indoctrinating children. They're like, oh, they got to be young enough to internalize these teachings, which happen to include denying your self-worth and happiness. And then they throw around their self-righteousness, and let's face it, you've got Star Catholicism. That's what Jedi is.
As well, there were also the alien space nuns. The natives that were kind of like really racistly poked fun at and alienated in their own home. That whole thing.
Exactly. And then there's the robes. So, 1 hour, 45 minutes in, it's when Kylo, right after he kills Snoke, him and Rey start fighting off these people in red who are guarding the throne room. And those people lacked any battle sense or teamwork, especially in the first half of the battle. Now, here's what you have to do to truly appreciate how bad they were. Rewatch the beginning of the battle and just watch each fighter individually each time you rewatch it. Just rewind to the beginning of the battle, watch one person, then rewind, watch another person, and you'll see that they're far from worthy of defending the throne. I'm like, maybe Snoke just loves hiring curs, like And for those who haven't had any field-tested melee weapons training, the ideal method for these people in red would be to close in cautiously and attack from varying angles while making the most of the pole arms covering them through thrusts and general intimidation. Instead, they were telegraphing their attacks, scurrying away so they could be repelled in turns, and attacking the exact same spots at the exact same time so that they could be blocked with ease. It was just so choreographed to the point where it's like too obvious. It took me out of it just to see like such horrible fighting.
Also, I thought the diversity of weapons didn't make a lot of sense for guards to have because, you know, like you're saying, they should move as a single unit. You know, like if somebody attacks the supreme leader, then they should close in, surround them, and I wonder who they talk to about this, because like I get that they're like, oh hey, you know, let's make it look like martial arts movies, which, you know, I know that Star Wars has been influenced by a lot of things, but like martial arts movies was really on the back burner. I mean, there's a lot more samurai influence than Bruce Lee. And like you get to the throne room and it's just like, wait, what? People have nunchucks now? And yes, I know that in the animated series there was a character that had like nunchuck lightsabers and stuff, and that's kind of ridiculous because like you would slice off your hand or arm or whatever. But
well, yeah, and here's the other thing too about that is exactly like you said, the samurai movies are not really equivocal to Bruce Lee movies, but like in the original trilogy, the choreography wasn't necessarily flashy, but it was very earnest. Mm-hmm. Like there was a real sense of, you know, them trying really hard and getting right up on top of each other, and it really helped build a lot of suspense and tension. And then with the prequels, I personally hate the fighting style, but I can aesthetically see like there's a lot of choreography and training and really hard work to make something that looks very beautiful to watch. Not like they're actually fighting for their lives or anything, but it's impressive. And then with this movie, it was like right in between in like this really no-go area with the action where they were editing around it like nobody actually knew how to do anything. And a lot of it is really just either aimless swinging or, especially like in the Red Room with the guards, if you actually watch anywhere but the center of the frame, it's super, super obvious that the guards are just kind of standing around waiting to get hit all the time. It's really obnoxious.
So yeah, when I end up an evil scientist with my own you know, layer and everything, and I hire my guards, I'm gonna be like, yeah, I don't care about competence. How flashy can you get beat up?
Exactly.
So that when they're showing this, it definitely looks good. So shortly after that, 1 hour 56 minutes in, Kylo Ren proves that the force choking someone is apparently a form of selecting a ruler. Now, when I watch this, I'm like, that's not a legitimate form of government. I certainly didn't vote for him. I was just taking right.
I realized none of our big blockbuster movies, like even the really good progressive ones, support like any form of democracy whatsoever. Like even Black Panther is very, very anti-democracy. I'm like, maybe we should have a fight to the death to determine who should be like a good ruler for like a really progressive civilized era. Like maybe we don't do that anymore. Maybe we have votes or debates or things like that. No.
And what you're getting on just right now, if you compare this to the original trilogy, Darth Vader didn't actually have a lot of political control. He was a commander mostly, and he let the other people deal with the politics and stuff like that. Like, yes, he would step in and like force choke somebody if he thought they were doing something stupid, and he did that a lot. But he stood by. You know, I think a lot of people, I guess not so much now, but a lot of people remember the original Star Wars movie wrong and think that Darth Vader actually blew up Alderaan, which is not what happened. It was Tarkin.
Yeah. Here's the thing. The ability to kill your opponents translates to your ability to govern a nation and make prosperity, obviously. And also,
sounds like the Russians.
If you force choke someone, then they won't make any more mistakes afterwards. Logic.
Yeah, that kind of sounds like the like what the Russians dealt with for like hundreds of years. Just from my very lackadaisical understanding of Russian government that Casey has explained to me on several occasions.
Yeah, I don't know that I would really put it that way.
Okay.
It was more of a negligence than a, you know, actual concerted effort to murder their own citizens kind of thing. It's actually kind of the other way around. There was kind of a thing in the 90s, or the 1900s, I should say, where Russians did not understand why the fuck Americans murdered or attempted to murder presidents. They're like, well, yeah, we try to murder our czars all the time, but we can't vote for them. If we're not happy with them, the only thing we can do is try to march in there and kill them so they know that they did wrong. You guys have a democracy, which, of course, was not true. That's why people feel like they need to murder presidents, but...
So anyway, let's not get too political. 2 hours, 5 minutes.
I don't know how we can not get too political in a movie that keeps returning to this idea of like, oh, rich people are evil and rich people all are part of the war machine, and the war machine sells their machines to both sides because they don't care, which is all really interesting. But then they're just like, we're not going to go any further than that. We just want to prove that we do politics occasionally.
Yeah, going off of that was like one of the most interesting topics in the entire film, and they just brushed over it like it was nothing.
Actually, I was saving this for my final point. The only thing I liked was the 2 times that they mentioned warmongering, but they made that little more than a brief mention. It's just like, That's the one thing I liked about it. They did not have much of.
That's kind of like another reoccurring problem with the movie is I know a lot of people who like the movie will say, well, yeah, but I like this thing and this thing and this thing. And I'm like, yeah, I like those parts too. But they're like briefly mentioned and have a lot of potential for an idea. And then they're completely discarded, never heard from again, and not utilized to actually fit into the movie the way that they should.
Yeah, they had like 20 whole good seconds in that movie. Come on.
That's all you needed, a 2.5 hour movie.
And the rest is people flailing around like idiots trying to attack each other. That's what Star Wars is, right?
Well, when you can see it.
And moving rocks and shit.
When you can see it.
So, 2 hours, 5 minutes, 20 seconds in. Rose defies the plan, almost dies in an attempt to save Finn, to tell him not to abandon the plan, to die, to save everyone. What? Rose. What?
And you ruined like one of the most poignant moments in the entire film. Like it was the only time in the movie where somebody actually did something with purpose, and then you ruined it.
And it was also the only time they made martyrdom look hard. Like, they didn't make it look bad. They made it look, like, really heroic and, you know, really admirable. But it wasn't like, ooh, I get to go get myself killed.
Also, like, logistically, if you're following the types of vehicles we have, the types of flying vehicles that we have, Rose would have killed them both. Like, there wouldn't have been this whole moment of like, oh, we got to save the one. No, they'd just both be dead, and that would have been totally pointless.
It would have been, no, Finn, don't kill yourself, die with me.
Yeah, and then everybody else dies too.
Yeah.
Yay.
So next one, I don't want to, linger
I lost you
too long on that one.
Okay.
Luke spends 2 whole minutes catching up with Leia before he stalls for 3.5 minutes. Then it only took them 1 minute to reach the exit. That means that they could have been there in the time it took Luke to catch up with Leia.
I also love how like Leia has no reaction to seeing Luke whatsoever. He's just like, Luke, you're here. I mean, I know she's force sensitive, so maybe she like felt it coming, possibly, question mark, but even if you know like, oh, my brother's about to walk through that door, that's still like a big reunion for them.
They've not seen each other in ages.
Exactly. So you would still think that would be like a no.
Like, that's one of those things where normally in cinematics, someone turns around dramatically to see someone entering the room, and instead it's just like, oh, yeah, you're here. I remember you.
It's
like,
also really awkward because one of the two force things that they consistently cannot really pull off in the movie is the force projection thing. And it's super awkward in that scene, especially because they film it like Leia is the only one who can see Luke, which makes sense. But then as he's starting to leave, it's like everyone can see him and they saw what he was doing the whole time, kind of. It's just filmed in a very awkward way.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it's kind of like, okay, so even if Leia knew he was coming, like, everyone just saw Luke appear out of nowhere and just was like, well, that happened. I guess he's going out there to protect us for a minute. Cool.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how like most people in the movie don't seem to like question anything that they're seeing at any point in time. It's like, even the whole stuff with like Rey and Kylo, how they have this force projection Skype conversation where they can like touch each other. Like, there isn't a single moment where they're like, how are we able to do this? Because like, if you look at the other Star Wars movies, people didn't communicate through this method. They used technology. They used the little blue screens and had it project. Even Jedis. So this whole force projection thing doesn't make a lot of just, huh?
It was a bit forced.
Yeah.
So, speaking of force things, that leads me to my next topic of cliches. So, let's see. 34 minutes and 30 seconds in, Luke goes, nothing can change my mind. Only to have R2-D2 show him something to change his mind in a matter of seconds. Lame. Let's see, 46 minutes in, we find out about the enslaved caretakers of the Jedi Sanctuary. You know they're enslaved. They do all the chores, have no personal investment in it, and they're stranded there too on, and this is my favorite line, the most unfindable place in the galaxy.
And the most unfindable place in that galaxy is fucking Ireland. Like, it's literally just Ireland. Like, you can film on real locations and make it look like a different place. Like, the best example is The Dark Knight. Yeah, they filmed in Chicago, but when you watch it, you're not just like, oh, hey, that's Chicago. You're like, wow, that's Gotham. But as soon as I saw this unfindable place, I was like, that's Ireland. Okay. And then, sure enough, the credits go by. Thanks to Ireland. Yep.
Yeah.
So much for unfindable.
49 minutes, 20 seconds. Rey immediately connects to the Force on a deep level, once again showing us how overpowered she is despite having zero training.
All right, can I bring this up because I haven't mentioned this yet, but there's been a lot of criticism about Rey being a Mary Sue. Do you think that she is a Mary Sue?
Depending on how you define it, because some people define it slightly different than others. But yeah, she's that character who's like walks in and is like, yeah, I can do this. I've heard of it done before, and it's like, oh yeah, I've seen this thing done on TV, and then instead of failing like someone should, she ends up nailing it. Like she just goes up to the gymnastics parallel bars, flips around, sticks the landing, and it's like, yeah, I heard about this thing called gymnastics. I figured I'd give it a try.
And that gets me onto one moment that one line that Yoda said in this movie: failure is the most important lesson. So because Rey doesn't fail at anything, I would say that she didn't learn a lesson in this movie.
Dude, Yoda's a hypocrite.
She hasn't learned but she hasn't learned a lesson in 2 films. We've known her for like 5.5 hours, and Rey as a character has never actually progressed or grown. She's just added more abilities under her belt, like she's Cartman, and she can just make up that she can do anything at any point. She's not actually like growing or making progress.
Real quick, Yoda says that failure is the best teacher, but think about this. Yoda's also the one who said there is no try.
Okay.
That's pure hypocrisy right there.
No, because you do or do not. That does not mean that you succeed or you try. You do or you do not, and then you either succeed or fail, and you learn from it.
Yeah. Well, whenever someone quotes Yoda saying that, I always follow up with, clearly Yoda's not familiar with the scientific method.
Well, but you do the experiments over and over again until you find a solution.
Yeah. Well, if there is no try, we shouldn't even have the word. So.
Well, I always interpreted that line as go in with the full determination that you only have 2 options. You either succeed or you fail. You know exactly what you're saying.
But that brings us to the concept of he's looking at it in terms. But think about this. Let's say you want to grow into a certain level of skill with something, right? Like you want to get better at something. There's an entire spectrum of growth that you could achieve. To say that there's no middle ground is kind of ridiculous.
But it's not saying that there's no middle ground. It's just saying you either take action or you don't take action. You can't say, oh, I tried, but I did not do something. You can say, I did something and I failed.
Here's the thing. To try means to put effort towards it. Now, it's an entirely different concept from doing and don'ting, okay? Because do and don't is more of a reaction to what happened. But, you can't... It reminds me a bit of the concept of you can't win if you don't try. You have to put effort towards something to achieve something. The concept of try is to put effort towards something. In order to do something, you have to put effort towards it. Now, I get what he's saying is meant to be more of a philosophical, at the end of the day, did you do it? But at the same time, I feel it's important to point out that motivation and effort are important. And sometimes people interpret Yoda's statement to mean the contrary. I mean, heck, like you said, failure is the best teacher. And, so we got to be able to say, yes, I tried and I failed, not I failed. You see the difference?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
But going back to the Mary Sue thing for a minute, as the girl in the group, I would just like to point out that I get really, 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 really sick and tired of the whole, but Rey is such a good role model for little girls, and little girls just don't have anybody to look up to. They don't have any like strong heroes in movies or in action films or in Star Wars, and it's like that is not as a girl.
No hard work.
Well, yeah, as a girl, I don't think that she stands for anything as a good role model, for sure. She does not actually impart any good morals for little kids to emulate, boys or girls, because she doesn't, like I said, she doesn't progress, she doesn't grow, she doesn't have like really strong character traits. She just kind of is around this big adventure, but she's not doing a lot to actually push it in any given direction or to work hard at something. But more importantly, we already had really amazing role models who were women in Star Wars and in action movies and in movies and on television. Like, there's not this weird drought of awesome female role models for any age, but especially not for kids. There's definitely a big drought of women of color who are, put in really big roles that can be role models for anyone and for little kids. But white girls, there's no shortage of that in media.
When someone makes the point of there's not a lot of blank in this, like usually it's because they've not really looked for it. It's usually like they're just like, I can't think of a lot of blank in this. That's usually what they mean.
Well, yeah, I mean, last year was a great year for women in film, and all the movies that people exclaimed were great examples were all ones that I did not think of great women in film. Like I think stuff like Atomic Blonde, that was a great woman in film.
Tank Girl.
What?
I love Tank Girl.
I adore Tank Girl. Neither of those are good role models for kids, but...
Have you watched The Long Kiss Goodnight?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Another example of a strong, kick-ass woman. Resident Evil. You want a strong woman who kicks ass?
You're also missing a lot of the, like, really big ones. Like, even, like, Sydney Bristow, any female from Battlestar Galactica... Ripley, Sarah Connor, Furiosa.
I think Star Wars could just take a lot of stuff, and I don't care if you even steal stuff from Battlestar Galactica. Like, just go ahead, steal stuff from Battlestar Galactica. It would make it better. You'd have better female characters. You'd have better minority characters, and you would have less complaints. And I think more people should learn stuff from the Battlestar Galactica that came out in the 2000s.
I will say this.
Also, the other thing, too, is, like, even if you only look at Star Wars, if you look at the spectrum from, Princess Leia to Queen Amidala, they're both really great female characters who are also good role models, who have human flaws and are very relatable and really interesting to watch and do a lot for the story and have really well-developed characters and interact with a bunch of different people. But they're also on, like, entirely different ends of the spectrum on how you do it. They're not both just this, like, well, I dress in skimpy clothes and I physically kick people's butts, and that makes me a strong female character.
So next time someone, brings up a point about strong female characters, ask them if they played any of the Borderlands games.
Or Buffy the Vampire Slayer, even.
Almost all of the female characters in the Borderlands series are badasses in their own right. Like, even the girl Ellie, the like they have a variety of body types too. But even the character Ellie, who's like almost perfectly circular shaped, she makes it clear that she doesn't need a man to her, and she does what she wants. And the opening scene shows her crushing a guy in a compactor because she doesn't take shit. But anyway, that's just Borderlands, and we're talking about Last Jedi.
But yeah. I don't know if you heard the interviews, but there was an interview with Daisy Ridley, the actress who plays Rey, where they asked her about her character being a Mary Sue, and first she said that thinking anybody's a Mary Sue is a sexist notion. First of all,
oh my god. Okay, there are Marty Stews. Like, shush, it's not a sexist thing. Come on.
Yeah, Mary Sue, Marty Stew, like basically an overpowered character that has no personality, and things just happen because the writer doesn't have enough skill or something to make conflict interesting. They just write things off without working things out.
Realize that if you say, if you think this, you're a sexist, that's actually a logical fallacy of attacking the person and not the subject.
Well, yeah, I mean the whole that's gotten really common in
I mean, if
a lot of arguments lately.
I don't know that that's actually true, because sexist is not interchangeable with bad person, and that's kind of the problem, is people use it that way. But like, if say somebody says, I specifically think that women are not only inferior to men, but are even inferior to animals because they are born as women, I don't think that it's a logical fallacy to say that, hey, because you think that, you're a sexist.
Well, what? Yeah, but that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is, criticizing a story, and criticizing the way that characters are. And yes, I will say that one of the reasons why it keeps on getting brought up is because this was not an issue about 10 years ago, but recently it's become an issue where so many female characters, and yes, I will say female characters, have been written this way. Now, I will say that in comic books and in film, there are also plenty of guys throughout history that have been treated this way. I mean, like Superman is like the greatest Mary Sue of all time.
Yep.
Like the fact that he can literally have kryptonite embedded in his body and still have the ability to fight and fly and do all that kind of stuff, you just ruined him. And like the fact that he can't die, because the whole death of Superman, he was just in a coma or whatever, come on. Yeah, Superman's the greatest Mary Sue of all time. So, just to kill that argument.
In all fairness, Rey should have died because 58 minutes in, when she's swinging the lightsaber around, she almost killed herself a baker's dozen times because she's not skilled with that weapon. The way she's moving it back and around and everything is completely useless. And she almost killed some of those little slaves when she cut off that chunk of rock, which for all she knows could have been a sacred rock.
Well, also this movie really wants to make murdering people look awesome. Like this and The Force Awakens both had this really big problem of taking these supposedly morally upstanding characters who don't like violence and don't want to kill people, have a shit ton of fun blowing people up just indiscriminately.
Wait, only when they mean to, actually, because 1 hour, 7 minutes, 30 seconds in, the room where everyone was gambling in is suddenly barren of people. And this isn't because of the time of night or some event going on or whatever. It's actually so that the heroes don't accidentally trample a bystander as they're rushing through with those creatures and everything, because that would look less heroic, because they wouldn't be trampling someone that we want to get trampled. It would be collateral damage.
Yeah, I mean it's Disney. You know, they've had this problem with a lot of their films. It was addressed in Civil War finally after they destroyed Manhattan, like
Again.
Yeah. And this time it was like some country in Africa. It wasn't Wakanda. What country was it in?
Was it
I think it was
Sokovia?
another huh?
Never mind.
I think it was another made up country in Africa because Marvel likes to do that. Like New York is a real place, but let's make up countries in other parts of the world. Anyways.
It's the kind of thing where the entire city's blowing up and everything, and you see collateral damage. You don't see anyone die. But when you do see someone, it's some little kid or something getting saved. It's like, dude, there's like millions of deaths occurring. But yeah, let's look at this one instance where someone doesn't.
Yeah, well, also another issue that I had in the film was when you had characters get killed, you didn't establish the characters well enough for me to care. Like you had Rose's sister, who's that? I mean, that was a cool little scene, but like it would have had a lot more impact if she was introduced in The Force Awakens to some capacity. But even in this movie, I mean, you could have taken a little bit of time, and not had all this bullshit Canto Bite thing, taking a little bit of time to just establish her as a character or them preparing for battle, do something like that so that like you kind of know who this person is before you see them die.
In regard to Rose's sister, I didn't like how she did like that weird thing where suddenly she catches the remote at an angle that really should not have happened. Like with the way she was sitting. But if they had established her better, that wouldn't have felt as bad. You know what I mean? Like, if it was like, okay, she's an established character, she has character, she's, been through this stuff and whatnot. Like, her
instead of just like, oh, this character who's only in this one scene, we couldn't even like not mess up this one scene.
Don't give this dramatic feeling to a character that you've built no drama around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, back onto another cliche. 1 hour, 9 minutes, 50 seconds. DJ appears at the last second to save Rose and Finn. Good timing? No, nigh impossible. Rose and Finn just left a little bit ago from the exact same area that DJ was at. They were being pursued by flying vehicles, and their movements were both quick and erratic. Meanwhile, DJ had to steal a vehicle, somehow track Rose and Finn, and do so from below the line of sight before the patrols even caught up with them. That's super contrived.
Yeah, it would have been better if he just were behind the patrols, following the patrols, and then took out the patrols.
Yeah.
But also, it seemed like the movie did not spend nearly enough time thinking about how a lot of events happen in time and space, because there were so many moments like that where it's like the timing doesn't make any sense. Like there was not nearly enough time for somebody to get from point A to point B, or like there's no sense of the area that they're in. Just like one example was after Haldo time warped through the spaceship and killed a bunch of people on the ship by ripping a huge hole in it. Somehow, Finn and Rose are totally alive, even though the entire squadron of people who were trying to kill them all died. There's a big gaping hole into space right next to them, and there's no vacuum of space happening. but also in this one scene, Captain Phasma, who was a second ago directly in front of them, comes directly from the opposite side of the wing and makes like a grand entrance. Like, how did she get all the way over there, and why would she come back? But that's, like, again, this is another reoccurring problem that just happens so much throughout the movie. It happens in pretty much every single fight scene, or most scenes where people have to do any sort of traveling. There's some sort of major problem with person cannot get from point A to point B like that.
Like Rose and Finn go over to that other planet with all the gambling and stuff, then get back into the Dreadnought, no less. And it's just like, oh, it's just a quick commute, you know? Like, no.
That's not how that works.
Anyway, 1 hour, 52 minutes, 30 seconds. Right after the light speed attack, Finn and Rose are completely unharmed while everyone around them is knocked out. Now, let's just assume that the ship hit somewhere far enough away from them that, you know, it's more of a concussion, shockwave, explosion, whatever. It was strong enough to knock out or kill people right next to them who were in body armor.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is a classic case of overpowered plot armor. And it's followed by more plot armor. And I'll refrain from pointing out all the ways that the hangar in the ship should have been influenced by the impact, but thoroughly off because of life support systems, all that sort of stuff. But shortly after that, 1 hour, 54 minutes in, a random platform saves Finn, and shortly after, the shiny lady falls to her death because she was on the platform that just happened to crumble. This is another plot armor ex machina. And feel free to finish up discussing other things before I get to my final topic, all about Poe.
Okay. What was her name again?
Which one?
Gwendolyn Christie.
Oh, Captain Phasma.
Yeah, Captain Phasma. That's who you're referring to as the shiny lady.
Yeah.
Yeah, for a lot of people, that was really frustrating because you had a character that was built up and could have been interesting if you had developed her more, but you didn't. I mean, that's the problem with almost every single character they've added into this new series. They haven't developed any of them. I mean, like,
except for Kylo Ren.
True. Kylo Ren is the only character that actually has an arc in the movie.
Yeah, he actually has like a real motivation in his life, and he's actually had ups and downs, and he has legitimate strengths and weaknesses, and also his strengths make sense because he was trained in both the light side and the dark side by the strong, like one of the strongest Jedi and one of the strongest Siths. So like, of course his overpowering still makes sense, even though he still gets his butt knocked around all the time. And he actually does have like, oh, hey, why are you evil? Oh, hey, this actually does kind of make sense. And oh, hey, here's this interesting part of your backstory. What is the interesting part of Rey's backstory, by the way?
They actually make it very clear that she's nobody.
Yeah, she's nobody with no history and no origin, and people think that she's not a Mary Sue when she's literally described as nobody from nothing.
Honestly, they should have gone the Western route with this. You know, if you're going to have a character like that, you know, take your influence from Mad Max, Man with No Name, something like that, where you have this reluctant character that comes out of nowhere, you know, does something for a price, you know, like, yeah, she needs
and you
food.
can cover her in mystery at least. You know, at least there's a thing of like, if we don't know about her, it's actually mysterious and you want to get to know her, and not this thing of, well, we know everything about her, there's just nothing there.
Yeah. Do you see what we're getting at?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, yeah, I agree with you.
And it's so frustrating because, like, I don't know if you heard some of the backlash that came, you know, like getting onto this whole like Mary Sue thing. You know, people Kathleen Kennedy, the producer of this film, and J.J. Abrams came out and said, well, if you don't like the movie, then you're probably one of those sexist alt-writers. To which I say, wow, what a way to stifle criticism, especially when it comes from women who are criticizing your film, and don't try to use that, oh, you have like some sort of internalized misogyny or something like that. No, allow people to criticize a movie for the flaws that it has. You know, if there is sexism in their argument, you can argue that they're sexist. But just saying that you don't like something and something has problems doesn't necessarily mean that it's a sexist argument that you're trying to make. And
It's
also,
like, let's say you have a forum room. You're going to set up a forum. And on one side, it says, people who agree with me. And on the other side, it says, Nazis. Like,
yeah.
well, where are you going to sit?
Yeah, but you know, it's frustrating because I truly think that the film underutilized its female characters. So like making that argument frustrates me because it's like, well, you know, I can't think of a single good developed female character in the movie. In fact, you know, like I just said before, the only character that's actually developed in the movie was Kylo Ren.
I mean, I will admit, I like Rose because Kelly Marie Tran does have a lot of charisma in a movie where even the charismatic actors have the dead-eye vacant expression of hookers who know they're not getting paid. But her character is god awful, and the script that they wrote for her is the worst. So when people say that, oh, well, I don't like Rose, I'm like, well, yeah, of course you don't. She's terrible. I just think the actress she did a lot more with the character than I think other people might have.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I learned with dealing with actors is, you know, your actors have to have a motivation. They have to, you know, think of something that drives their character. You know, they have to, you know, get into the headspace. And you can see on the actor's face in this movie them trying to do that. That's not what you want to see in a movie.
Well, real quick, I can probably put this quite eloquently. As a feminist, I think that female roles should deserve better. Just like how, as a Star Wars fan, I feel the series deserves better. I feel that the female roles deserved better. And I think that's probably the best way to put it as, yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Well, we did get Jyn Erso.
Yeah, I like Jyn Erso a lot.
She's awesome.
And she had none of the problems that I was actually afraid of her having because of Rey before I saw the film.
And also going back to what I was saying about there's not enough good female characters for little girls to look up to. Jyn Erso does it so much better than Rey has in 5.5 hours worth of screen time.
Yeah.
Like, when I was watching Rogue One, I was like, man, if I could be anyone in a Star Wars movie, I'd want to be Jyn Erso. She is cool. She is smart. She doesn't take shit from anybody. You know, she's got this whole thing going on with her. The thing I liked the most about her was the part of the movie where she goes up and she states her case and she's kind of unsure of herself and she doesn't really have a lot of confidence that her plan's going to work, but she's still like, okay, well, I have a plan and I think this is the best option. And if you want to come with me, then let's go do it. And everyone follows her because they believe in her based on her ability to lead and to think and to work with other people, to be collaborative. You know, those are all great things. When does Rey ever have to like actually talk to people or work as a team or think about anyone other than just how does she look cool in certain shots?
So I loved the characters in Rogue One. When Rogue One started, and I was skeptical too. I went in skeptical, It started up. I'm like, these are such great characters. I hope they show up later in the series. Obviously.
Whoops. Whoopsie-days.
It's like when you start someone off on Game of Thrones. It's like, hey, look at how great that character is. Don't you
Better enjoy
watching
them.
that character? Get attached, why don't you? So, that said, let's talk about an odd fan favorite known as Poe.
And by the way, he's the one I was specifically talking about having that dead-eyed expression throughout most of the movie.
Now, I've titled this part All About Poe because, let's face it, in his mind, it is all about him. 37 minutes, 50 seconds. Holdo, right after becoming the de facto leader of the rebels, calls Poe a rebel. And it hurts his feelings. Oh, no. 42 minutes, 50 seconds. 5 minutes later, Poe is like, Holdo says I'm a liability for ignoring the chain of command. I'll show her by ignoring the chain of command.
Well, because the chain of command is stupid in this case.
Yeah, also, like, I think one of the things that a lot of people fail to realize is rebellions and rebellions are essentially like terrorist cells. So like chain of command is kind of funny when you're talking about a rebel alliance, like
you're a rebel amongst rebels, you bastard.
Yeah, exactly.
So allow me to get through this before you continue, because I'll probably bring up one of the points that you would otherwise have mentioned. So yeah, the chain of command is important, and I'll get to that. 1 hour, 40 minutes. DJ says just then that he cut a deal with the Empire. You see, what happened was Poe's plan ended up causing DJ, Rose, and Finn to get together. And when the plan failed, DJ's like, okay, well, I'll help the Empire to get out of this. So someone then follows up by saying that his information checked out and they found the rebel escape ship, which causes Holdo's plan to fail. This, Poe's plan, caused Holdo's plan to fail. So DJ, hacker extraordinaire, was delivered right into the hands of the Empire in time to thwart Holdo's plan, all thanks to Poe's ignorance. You see, let's look at this carefully. Poe gets most of their fleet killed to go after a dreadnought, despite orders otherwise. Yes, it was destroyed, but the relative percentages of rebel to Empire casualties was far from an intelligent move. Let alone, the fact that we're talking about people and everything. It's not just numbers. And like, Poe's supposed to know a lot of these people. He's not broken up in the least over it. Next, he ruins Holdo's otherwise successful plan of escape, and many more rebels die because of this. At this rate, I believe he does want to end the war with the death of the rebels. He repeatedly assumes command, mutinies, gets people killed, and yet never really takes a hard look into the mirror or shows any remorse for the repercussions of his actions. And I think that leads me to one important point about Poe. Poe is a sociopath. Now, the moral of the story here is that Holdo was second in command for a reason. She was patient, calm, and had legitimately good reasons for playing her cards close to the chest. First off, you can't waste time telling every soldier who asks what the plan is. You can't tell everyone also because many are trying to jump ship early and might end up at the mercy of the Empire, which would cause them to give away what was happening. to put it another way, if I was a soldier, I can't just get battle plans from the general at my leisure for good reason. Holdo's not perfect, and neither are the resources she's given. But in order to make the most of what they have, everyone has to be united in action, not counteracting each other, which divides resources and manpower. That's the importance of chain of command. And we shouldn't glorify the actions of a trigger-happy sociopath who keeps getting everyone killed.
He also does very specifically try to work with Holdo. Like, every time he comes up with a plan, he goes up to Holdo and he's like, hey, by the way, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this because I think this is going to save people's lives. What's your plan? Do you even have a plan? Can you tell us that you have a plan to save us? And she's like, I am not giving a yes or a no. I'm not even telling you I have a plan. Let me give you just some cliche sayings so it really looks like I have no idea what I'm doing. There's not a good reason why she couldn't either A, take him aside and be like, hey, dude, I have a plan. I can't tell you what's going on, but I need you to trust me. Never comes up. She has to grandstand and make herself seem like, oh, yeah, I totally, this new character that nobody knows who I am. Like, I get that the audience doesn't know, but, like, nobody knows who she is. How the fuck was she the second in command? But she's like, well, I can't tell you. And while in general I agree there might be a good reason why she shouldn't, like, tell everybody what the plan is, or maybe even not tell Poe. That's not actually established in the movie. Why in the world she couldn't tell Poe, oh, hey, guess what? There's this planet that's got a military base, and it's got armor, and it's got a lot of stuff stockpiled, and we can defend ourselves there, and if we go in our little transport ships, then we might not get seen. And of course that ends up backfiring anyway, essentially for all the reasons Poe said that it would backfire. But if you had just even said, like, hey, guys, we need to stay calm. We have a plan. We know what we're doing. Instead of just being like, I will not say anything. Like, as a leader, you still have to give people the confidence to believe in you, even if you can't tell them.
Her plan was actually about to be successful. Like,
her plan seemed improvised, given the context that we're given in the movie. It seemed like she didn't have a plan, and she was just waiting for something to pop up.
And she got kind of lucky.
She came up with something that was working up until DJ used his hacking skills, I guess, to uncover it. Which also really shouldn't have even happened.
I don't think that's what happened. But also, the other thing is that, like, based on the timing, I think what might have happened is Holdo really didn't have an idea. And then once she talked to Leia after she came out of coma, Leia was like, oh yeah, we're actually really close to this planet over there. Let's load up the transport pods and just go over there. Let's do that. And Holdo didn't want to admit that she didn't have a plan. So she's like, oh yeah, see, like, I had that. Why didn't you just trust me? Even though I did nothing to earn trust. I mean, that's the big thing. It's one thing to not be able to tell everybody details, but if you're a leader, you have to instill confidence and trust. Even Jyn Erso was able to instill confidence and trust to a room full of strangers she didn't know. There's no reason why Holdo couldn't have been more communicative, couldn't have worked more with a bunch of people, including Poe. She just doesn't do anything when she's in charge until she gets to go on the loggy ride of martyrdom and suicide. Yay.
Also with Chain of Command, different members would have shifted command. Like, if Leia's out, then, you know, Holdo takes her place, but that also means that the people below in Chain of Command go up. So there would be people in the know of what was going on. So this whole conflict with Poe shouldn't have happened to begin with, because other people would have been in the know and could have told Poe, hey, we have a plan. You know, right now she doesn't want to give that away, you know, all that kind of stuff. If she doesn't want to say it, somebody else could explain that to him. That's how the military works.
I mean, that's essentially how any team functions.
Right. And And that's the weird thing about this movie. You have an entire unit of people, but they don't seem to function like a unit. They function like individuals, which just tells me that Rian Johnson doesn't have a clear understanding on how groups work or how the military works.
Or also how the transport ships work. Because think about this. Finn and Rose were able to go all the way to another planet and come back, which was obviously a decent distance away, in such a short amount of time. And yet, when the other people get in one of these escape vessels and everything, and they're getting away from the ship and whatnot, it takes them for freaking ever to get to their destination.
Yeah.
In all fairness, like if you're gonna do the whole escape ship thing, they could have scattered, lost a couple people, but if effectively scattering, there's a lot they could have achieved through that method.
Yeah.
Well, those are all my points that I got from the movie.
I feel like Poe was not nearly as much of a sociopath as Finn was in Force Awakens, but again, I do think that this is something like Poe has the exact same problem as a lot of people on the good side, quote unquote, the good light side, where they're like, well, we're trying to like see really cool, like we got it together, but we just kind of want to kill a lot of people and fly around doing it because that's fun.
I mean, hey, maybe when they say light, they just mean less calories.
I think so.
Yeah, the Last Jedi was a mess, and I had heard a lot of critiques about the movie, but I needed to watch it again for myself to kind of pull it together. For me, the problems are a lot more narrative and acting. Like that's really what upsets me in the film. I think that a lot of actors are just trying to find their inspiration, and you can see it on their face that they're trying, but they're not given a lot of direction. So there's that kind of look that Casey was referring to, where also one of the things that I heard a lot of criticism say about the movie was it felt like Rian Johnson was angry at The Force Awakens and at Star Wars in general, because a lot of stuff in the movie felt like very vindictive.
Like, oh, hey, this thing that you love, this person you love, this concept you love, just throw it away. Kill it if you have to.
Yeah, I think that line in the film, "Let the past die, kill it if you have to," sums up a lot of what people feel about this movie and what it did to Star Wars.
It did remind me a lot of watching the 2016 Ghostbusters. Where it's like, not only do I think that you don't like this franchise, I'm pretty sure you only saw it like one time 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It's not how the Force works.
Yeah. Oh my God. So can we talk for just a brief moment about Force projection?
One more thing though.
Okay.
I will say this. Dang it, I lost my train of thought. Go ahead.
Okay. So Force projection in the movie is so forced, and it doesn't narratively, it doesn't help to elevate any moment. the fact that Luke Skywalker's death essentially is away from everybody else makes his death insignificant to almost everybody present. You took a character who we've followed for an entire trilogy and just said, "Oh yeah, well nobody's going to see his death and all that kind of stuff." Like Obi-Wan got a great death in the only movie that he was alive in. Yes, he was a Force ghost in Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, but yeah, so Obi-Wan had a very impactful death, and like that could have influenced Rey. Obviously, I get that you don't want to repeat the moment with Han Solo dying in The Force Awakens, but it just felt so cheap to have him die away from everybody like that.
But also the way that they did it was super awkward.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you had the death of the Star Wars character, and you didn't even bother to make it make any sense in terms of continuity or motivation or really explain what was happening. Because, like, he's floating, and he falls over, and he passed out from exhaustion. And then you get an establishing shot, and then you cut back, and he's, like, climbing up the rock, and he gets back, and he sits down, and you go back to that first view you already had from behind, but then this time he disappears into the Force. And then his robe flies away in the wind. And it's like, what?
Completely.
But you spent too much time making it confusing what he was doing or what he was feeling or what was even happening on screen, that when he died it didn't even feel sad.
Yeah,
it was just awkward.
And that whole scene just felt like Rian Johnson just wanted to have his death of him looking at the twin suns. Like, that whole setup just seemed to be for that moment.
Which that moment was great, but there's no reason why you couldn't rework that scene and still have the twin suns.
So I want to say this about The Last Jedi. I want to kind of paraphrase Luke while doing it. Everything about that was completely wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that.
The whole movie. It's funny how everything you did in that movie was completely wrong.
Mm.
Yeah. And the craziest thing, and I know I've stated this before, but like, where do you go from here? What, Kylo Ren's just the big bad? Like, I know that they're like forming like the Resistance is still there, and then you have the whole thing with the kids playing with their toys and the whole Target commercial at the end. But like, it just, I don't know where this movie is trying to lead to. And like, some people are like, see, isn't that great? And it's like, no,
dude, when Kylo Ren says to Rey, like, hey, let's take over this thing together. And she's like, don't do this. I'm like, don't do this whole movie. Like, no, but no, like, he's saying, let's take control of this and make the best of it. And she just automatically assumes that he's going a bad direction with it.
It's so frustrating that Rey doesn't have a motivation in the movie. Like, there's the whole thing about, like, she wants to know who her parents are. Well, that seems like you're trying to cater specifically to the people that want to know who Rey's parents are, but that shouldn't be Rey's sole motivation. That's a weak motivation.
Especially considering you're flying all around the galaxy to figure out who your parents are, and they're probably like from that planet or something. You don't know, but why are you flying about aimlessly trying to figure it out?
Yeah, they got machines that can tell like midichlorians and stuff like that. So like surely you can get a paternity test.
But dude, what about the plot? And then when Luke asks her, why are you here? She says something, awakened in me, blah blah blah. Like, what about your parents? Like, you didn't bring that back up again. Like, you said you're scared and you pretty much want to get rid of whatever awakened in you rather than use it to find out, answers. Like, she's a bit all over the place when someone's like, hey, why are you doing this? And she's just like, well, the thing over there, but you know what? I don't really care about that. It's this thing now. Like,
yeah, she's a very poorly written character. And it's unfortunate because, the whole trilogy depends on her.
and female characters deserve better than that.
They do. I mean, I would hope that a woman could direct this better. I'm pretty sure they could, at least make her more of a focus than Kylo Ren in this movie. However, the Kylo Ren stuff in the movie is the only thing that I can really compliment about the movie. Everything else just feels.
Scene where that guy he force choked, the cur from earlier and everything.
Like there's that. Aldo? No, sorry, Hux. Yeah.
Hux, yeah. They're both in that big machine, right? And he's like telling them to fire on Luke, but they're both doing this, and the main impression I got was, oh my god, Kylo and Hux are backseat driving an Empire.
Yeah.
But they're in the front seat, but they're also it's like watching someone try and drive a car from the back seat when there's no one in the front seat.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I don't really understand about the First Order is like how did the First Order rise up? Since like they clearly established that the Empire was destroyed, but then there was this First Order that rose up, or was it just the remnants of the Empire? I'm not really sure. And the movies haven't really made that explicit, and unless some book explains it, I don't know. And like
maybe they're just the rebels to the rebels. Maybe they just hate the rebels so much they're rebelling against the rebels.
I mean, that's yeah.
Sorry, I don't care if there's a book that explains all of it, because I like novelizations and expansions and comics in terms of like, oh, hey, this thing that was already really great and really well developed. There's this whole other thing that happened before or on the side, and it's like an extra thing that would be really cool if you want to check it out, but you don't need to. If it's like, oh, hey, we had a 2.5-hour movie and we still couldn't get this worked out, we'll put out something extra. No! That doesn't count.
It needs to stand alone. You can't be like, hey, this movie's really good if you also read this book in addition to it.
That does not count.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm saying that's just a ridiculous way of doing it, because a movie should be able to be, should be able to stand alone. And if it can't, then, you can criticize it for that.
Also, getting into continuity errors, one of the most hilarious continuity errors that happens in the movie is at the very end when Rey and Poe meet for the first time, which is hilarious because they met for the first time in The Force Awakens.
Deja vu.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we met before. No, I swear we didn't. Tell me your name again.
Some people are like that, though. Like, I was working on a set with this one actor, and every time I met him, he would introduce, like, he had no idea he had ever met me. He's like, oh, hey, I'm so-and-so. I'm the lead actor. Who are you? What do you do? And I'm like, I was here when you were being casted. I was there at your auditions. I've been there for 3 of your 5 rehearsals. This is the 6th time we've met in 3 months. If you don't know my name or what I do, that's fine, but you should at least be able to look at me and know that you know me. Like, come on, dude.
I remember people, I just stuck at names.
Yeah, like if it's something like you just can't remember somebody's name or you don't remember their face, that's fine. But like,
or if they got married and changed their last name, you know, like.
yeah, stuff like that totally happens. And I'm one of those people where if I see somebody outside of the context I normally see them, I can't figure out who they are. But I can look at them and know I know them.
Yeah.
Mr. Bond, we meet again for the first time. Dude, that's exactly what happened. They met again for the first time.
Yeah. But like it was that, and then there was also just like little lines, like the fact that Luke Skywalker refers to a lightsaber as a laser sword. It's like, man, I wasn't expecting somebody in Star Wars to say that. You know what I mean? Like, I could understand, like, you know, somebody who's like not like a hardcore Star Wars fan. What's that?
It's because he's old. When you start referring to remotes as clickers and say, "Oh, give me the thing over there," you know, the thing, it does the thing. It's because he's old. That's why.
Yeah, I guess.
It's funny because it's true.
Also, the whole thing with destroying the books, you know, that was a great little moment with Luke Skywalker and Yoda, and they actually used a puppet. It was awesome because I was like, oh, that's the Yoda I remember, not the CGI Yoda, but the Yoda from Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. All the feels.
It was also one of the only times that they actually had their practical effect on screen, because this movie had the most practical creature effects of any Star Wars film, and it still looks like ass because they drew all over really gorgeous, intricate, beautiful animatronics and robotics and puppets
wait.
with crappy ass CGI.
Wait. More than Return of the Jedi as far as practical effects go?
It was the most creature effects in any Star Wars film.
Seriously, more than Return of the Jedi with like Jabba's whole palace and all that kind of stuff going on.
You didn't find the
seriously.
Yeah.
No, I'm not saying I don't believe you. I'm just like that's shocking.
Yeah, most like essentially every creature that was in the movie was at one point a practical effect that was then had crappy CGI rendering drawn on top of it. The porgs are actually all practical. The crystal critters are actually really beautiful robotic puppets that are made out of like 20,000 crystals a piece and have a really gorgeous, intricate movement and a lot of really great work in the face. And it looks terrible in the movie because they didn't. Well, one, they kept trying to bring the puppets onto locations, which is a terrible idea. And then after that, to compensate, they have to draw all over it in CGI, but then they have to make it look consistent throughout the movie. So then it ends up being CGI'd most of the movie.
But weren't the creatures just absolutely porgous? Freaking porgs, my god. I hate them. You guys still there?
Yep.
Okay.
What?
No, I was just saying the creatures were porgous because, you know, like that's pretty much the main creature that they focused on.
Yeah, and for a movie that had so many creature effects, they didn't bother to make any of them like people. They only focused on the ones that would make really good stuffed animals.
Yeah.
Or unless they could be used for a sexual assault gag. I never needed to see BB-8 get molested. That was weird.
Huh.
Hey, can I put a coin in your coin slot?
Huh. That little guy was really paying out too.
Mm-hmm.
Really just shoving more in there. And then when it shoots the coins out, that was a money shot. Which makes it even more gross because he was molested.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so anybody have any final thoughts?
I kind of hope that they don't make another one.
Well, there are two more
too
coming
late.
out, and
Yeah.
and then there's going to be a animated show, which is going to be a prequel to The Force Awakens, which is going to get more into
Borderlands already did the pre-sequel stuff. Like pre-sequel has already been done. They're ripping it off of Borderlands at this point. Which honestly, if they're gonna do that, I really hope they have strong female characters like in Borderlands 2. But you know they won't.
Well, I did hear that Gwendolyn Christie Phasma.
Yes.
I did hear that that Phasma is going to be a character in the show. So she's going to get her time to thrive as a character, but it won't be in any of the movies.
Yeah, I want them to do well, but when I wish upon a Death Star, it just doesn't work out. Because it's Disney. When you wish upon a Death Star.
I got it. Yeah. Man, so yeah, I would like for Star Wars to get better. I don't know if I told you this or not, but Rian Johnson has been given the blessing by Kathleen Kennedy, the producer of this, to do an entire. Yes, the guy who single-handedly made Star Wars seem stupid.
Wait.
And
the term is make Star Wars great again.
Well,
It's basically,
what I
You get
want to
it?
know is, when are we gonna get these movies that Kathleen Kennedy has promised us and keeps promising over and over again? Oh, we're gonna have we're gonna have all these diverse people direct Star Wars. We're gonna have women. We're gonna have people of color. We're gonna have women of color. It's gonna be so great. You won't believe it. And then she just keeps approving of white dudes. Which I normally wouldn't really care. Like, I definitely wouldn't care if they were doing good work with it. But when she just keeps saying over and over very publicly, like, well, yeah, of course women should direct Star Wars. Of course people of color should direct Star Wars. And then she's just like, white dude, another white dude. Let's bring that first white dude back. Okay.
Like they should, but we're not gonna do it.
But she keeps promising that they will. And it's like, just don't lie about it. Just don't do it. Don't say you'll do it if you won't do it. Just don't lie about it.
so do you know the story about I'll continue to wrap this up, but do you know the story about episode 9 and like who originally was going to direct it? Hello?
No.
Okay. So it was originally going to be directed by Colin Trevorrow, who did Jurassic Park, Jurassic World.
Mm-hmm.
And he did like one other indie film before then. And then last year he did a little movie called The Book of Henry, which was so bafflingly ridiculous and awful. Like, you need to see this movie, and then you need to watch this guy like totally rip the movie, Folding Ideas, rip it apart, because it is one of the most fascinatingly complicated, ridiculously stupid movies I've ever seen. But apparently Kathleen Kennedy got wind of this movie and kicked him off the project, which from what I heard, Mark Hamill and Daisy Ridley both were really fond of the direction that he was going with the series. Now, that's all changed because Mark Hamill was, in his version, was going to be alive in episode 9, and he was eventually fired because too many of the things that he wanted to do couldn't happen because of what Rian Johnson did.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Huh.
So yeah,
I do have a funny theory. Since we know force projection is now a canon thing, it made me think maybe that's what really happened when Obi-Wan Kenobi disappeared. And maybe the robe he left behind was just like that little dice thing that got left behind and eventually disappeared. Maybe the robe eventually disappeared too. Now, think about this. If Obi-Wan Kenobi didn't actually participate over there, if he was somewhere else, maybe he's still alive. And maybe the ghost we see of Obi-Wan Kenobi is just a force projection, kind of just checking in. Because we never see these force ghosts of bad guys. So maybe like it's just the Jedi retirement plan is you fake your death, and then every now and then you force project yourself as a ghost to check up on people.
I can dig it.
Isn't that hilarious?
Yeah.
Like this whole force projection, maybe this was supposed to be a secret so that they could, like Yoda's probably chilling somewhere too, you know, having a big old laugh at everyone. Like because remember, Yoda just like, when he died, he's just like, ugh, you know, like easy to just fake that. Like he's a monk. He can slow his pulse down to seem like he's dead. So, you know, Luke could have left and he's just like, ha, the sucker he is. I'll go astral project myself to him later. Give him the business.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, I don't even know what is possible in Star Wars. And I've heard the argument that some people say where it's like, oh, well, every single Star Wars film added a new force power. And it was like, yeah, but there's a difference between bending the rules and completely breaking the rules, you know, which is kind of like what this film felt like. It felt like,
the person that immediately after.
Yeah, that still doesn't. I get that Luke died, you know, after using that power and everything like that, but like still, why did he have to? I mean, you also like the fact that you establish that the X-Wing is in the water and you don't pay that off. Like, I mean, I guess Rian Johnson really didn't want to have that fan favorite moment where, you know, he brings up the X-Wing. Oh, he couldn't do it in The Empire Strikes Back, but what? He does it now. You know how many people would be cheering in the theater if that happened? But no, he's going to astral project himself. He's going to do something that's never been done in a Star Wars film, so that you can't have that moment where the crowd is cheering.
Actual projections.
What's that?
Unless the ghosts are astral projections.
Yeah. Might as well make the X-Wing astral projection too. I mean, you can make dice astral projections. So
the entire movie
and lightsabers. You can make lightsabers astral projections.
Yeah.
And one thing that was interesting that I heard somebody mention was this is the only Star Wars movie outside of Rogue One that had two lightsabers in a scene and they never clashed against each other. I just thought that was interesting. Anyways, so thanks for coming on, Maverick.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure.
And I'm sure we will talk again about a movie that we're all excited to see, which is Han Solo or Solo, a Star Wars story?
Don't you cuss at me. Talk about, I'm okay not watching any more Star Wars. I'll watch the Clone Wars, the animated thing, because I know you vouched for that. I'll have to check that out eventually.
I never vouched for the Clone Wars. I've heard. I saw Rebels, which I enjoyed, but I never vouched for Clone Wars. I know some people like swear by it, but
okay,
it's a little too much prequel stuff for me.
Okay, so Rebels is what you're talking about. Yeah. I'll have to check out some of that stuff, but none of this new stuff that's coming out. None of, like, it's just too much. It's a waste of my time at this point.
I feel like a masochist right now because like, I'm gonna stick with it, but I'm not looking forward to it. It's kind of like the DC movies. Like I have to see how much of a train wreck they all are, but I want them to stop.
Dude, it's like you ordered dessert and it doesn't taste good and it's horrible for you, but you're just like, I ordered this. I'm gonna continue to eat it.
Yeah.
You poor thing, man. Best of luck in that.
Thank you. And to all of you, may the Force be with you always.